It's time for Lefties Losing It, and we've got some weapon-grade Trump derangement syndrome antics coming up for you. But let's start in the UK, where saying just about anything against the leftist orthodoxy will see the police at your door. It may get you charged. They're jailing people for spicy, inflammatory tweets. Lucy Connolly is serving 31 months for a couple of anti-immigration posts. That's longer than some grooming gang members have received as far as prison terms. Talk about a two-tier justice system, which all brings me to Glastonbury and the orgy of hate and hysteria celebrated by a massive crowd of lefty simpletons. Here is some rapper and anti-British, anti-West Islamist supporting miscreant, part of a duo called Bob Vylan. And watch as this rapper mocks Brits who want their country back.
Heard you want your country back. Shut the up. Heard you want your country back. You can't have that. The only place I know, stolen right under my nose, my ignorant scum, trying to lay claim to a land that ain't theirs.
And watch the crowd, a sea of pasty white, self-loading Brits cheering against their own country.
Heard you want your country back. You can't have that. Heard you want your country back. Shut the up.
And that same idiot crowd were happy to join in with genocidal chants about killing Israelis and ending the only Jewish state.
Free, free. Free, free. Hey, but have you heard this one though? Death, death to the IDF. 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 Hell yeah, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be, will be, inshallah.
And here are more privileged, almost uniformly white lefty misfits who have paid a lot of money to be a part of whatever this is. And if that wasn't bad enough, the crowd were treated to far-left loon and former Labor Party leader Jeremy Corbyn banging on about Donald Trump and building bridges, not walls. But isn't there a massive wall, a massive fence around the music festival to ensure only those with a valid ticket are allowed to enter to hear crap like this?
If you can see that far, look on the wall right over there that surrounds this wonderful festival. And there's a message on that wall for President Donald Trump. And you know what it says? Build bridges, not walls.
But they built a wall around the festival. They didn't build a bridge to allow anybody who wants to come. They built a fence to keep people out. Now, here is ageing DJ Slim Shady serving up dangerous levels of cringe. The bald little eunuch had a big screen featuring Donald Trump, and he and his sad little audience were giving the president the finger. I don't know if the Trump administration can recover from this. Now, here is a socialist proving yet again that the left is all about projection and really they operate without shame. Here is Bernie Sanders accusing the Republicans of being extremist and Stalinist.
The Republican Party has not just become a right-wing extremist party. In many cases, it's become like a Stalinist party, a cult of the individual.
I got to tell you, the chutzpah is off the charts with that dude. But here is Bernie Sanders getting an education. He went on the Joe Rogan show. Now, remember, Joe Rogan used to love Bernie, used to back him. But now I think he's seeing him clearly for the leftist clown that he is.
Was the poll incorrect?
Yeah, the poll was wrong. So what?
What about the conversation that they had with Kamala Harris, where they edited the answers that she had?
60 Minutes has a sterling reputation for investigative journalism.
That's not investigative journalism if you change someone's answers. If you ask her a question and she comes with a rambling answer that doesn't make sense and you edit that out.
Suing media has the impact of intimidating media.
No, but it's not that. It's deceptive editing.
I don't know.
You give people a different perception of who this candidate is than reality.
Right.
But that's not objective journalism.
I know.
Would you agree with that?
I don't know that I agree with your analysis of it.
I think that's universally accepted that that's what they did.
Then the impact is clearly intimidation. He wants to defund public broadcasting. Why is that? Because they also would run critical stories of him.
They say things that are defamatory and factually incorrect. What other course does a person have other than a lawsuit?
And Joe Rogan also schooled Bernie, the socialist with 3 houses, the climate change warrior who takes private jets around the country. Joe schooled him on global warming.
You got to deal with this climate change issue. And I know that, there are some people who think climate change is a hoax. It ain't a hoax. I think the last 10 years have been the warmest on record.
First of all, the reality is that the Earth's temperature has never been static, right? We could both agree on that. It's always been up and down. There's been ice ages and heat waves. And then the Washington Post looked at it. What was the time period that they looked at? That essentially they found that we're in a cooling period. That the Earth over the past X amount of years, and this was like a very inconvenient discovery, but they had to report the data, and kudos to them for doing that. Scientists have captured the Earth's climate change over the last 485 million years. Here's a surprising place we stand now. So look at the far end of that graph, and you see we're in a cooling period.
Well, I'm not sure. I didn't read that article, but the scientists who are out there, I think.
I know, but there's a lot of money involved in that too, Bernie. That's part of the problem. There's a lot of money involved in this whole climate change emergency issue, and there's a lot of control, and that's a big part of this problem.
Now, here is thoroughly confused doom goblin Greta Thunberg, this time in Budapest, in a keffiyeh, marching for pride and misusing the word fascist.
Today I am joining thousands of people in Budapest in Hungary who are defying Viktor Orbán's desperate attempt to ban the Pride March. Pride is both a protest but also a celebration of love and who we are. This is yet another fascist attack on human rights, but you cannot ban love.
Yeah, why don't you try that in a Muslim country, Greta? How about you try it, I don't know, in Gaza or even the West Bank? You're not going to get far. Now, Glastonbury has given us plenty of fodder on this program for Lefties Losing It in particular, and the music festival has come to symbolise just how hateful and divorced from reality much of the left has become. Timothy J. Lynch, a professor of American politics at the University of Melbourne, has penned a fantastic piece in today's Australian about the festival, writing, "Piling left-wing hypocrisy upon middle-class privilege offers us a window into the appeal of alternatives. Donald Trump has given us one. For too long, a decadent elite preached the virtues of globalism, transnationalism and mass immigration. The result was an economic and cultural decline for pretty much everyone else." Let's bring in Sky News contributor Kosha Gator. Kosha, Professor Lynch notes that in Britain, their Trump, Nigel Farage, is more likely to be PM than the Conservative leader. He writes, "Farage's Reform UK members did not fill many fields in Somerset. They did fill ballot boxes in the May local elections." And he makes an excellent point there. Reform is in many polls coming out ahead of Labor and the Tories.
They sure are. It is definitely the ascendant political movement in the UK, starting with Brexit, or actually even before that. This has been a 20-year movement in the making that Nigel Farage has helmed through various positions, and we shall see. Many do think that he is destined to be the next PM. We certainly know, who knows if that's going to happen or not. There's a lot of wood to chop, but we certainly know that the Tories have failed miserably, as have the traditional Republicans in the US and even the Liberal Party over here. They're not offering that alternative that he speaks of in that article very eloquently. And people really need one because the direction and the center of gravity of the culture for so long was just getting more and more bizarre, drifting the whole country, the whole culture, the whole system more and more to the bizarre left, not even the moderate left. And sometimes you need a snap, like a boomerang back in the other direction. And Farage certainly seems to be providing that more than anybody else in the UK.
Well, yeah, let's stick with the US now. And you recall in April when the media were having an absolute meltdown, blaming Donald Trump for destroying the economy with his tariffs, crashing the stock market.
Out front tonight, the breaking news, a wipeout. $2.5 trillion today gone in the rout on Wall Street in response to Trump's trade war against 185 countries.
Well, the news is all good now. The S&P 500 is at a record high. But Kosha, have a look at how the media is reporting it. Let's have a look at the New York Times first. They just can't help themselves. Even the good news is presented in some sort of a negative light, talking there about Trump's turmoil. But the reality is that despite what the experts told us about these tariffs being enormously inflationary, about them crashing the share market, crashing the economy, that has not been the experience thus far.
It has not. I think the S&P is something shy of 3 percentage points above where it was on Inauguration Day. Granted, it did go through a lot of volatility, big downward swings and upswings, but it's generally normalizing as people are getting used to Trump 2.0. Also, the market, the S&P is not the biggest driver, biggest thing that Trump is playing to this time around because it doesn't really focus the everyman.
Exactly.
And then the tariff revenue is coming in to the tune of $150 billion or so to date. And predictions ranged from about 300 to 500 billion per year that would come from this, the External Revenue Service, as Trump branded it. So we're about 1/3 to 1/5 of the way there already, if you believe those estimates. And you're absolutely right. It did not trickle down into mass inflation on every good everywhere, maybe a little bit here and there. But by and large, the markets and the supply chain tend to absorb those increases before they pass it on. It's not a straight line pass through to the American consumer because the American consumer market is the most valuable, desirable market in the world. That was Trump's thesis. It had never been tried before in modern economic times. He's trying it, and it seems to be working.
Well, let's hear a little bit more about the billions in new revenue coming in through these tariffs. Some 121 billion so far. Here is CNBC.
How much we've been collecting in revenues. And I did this in part because Wilfred's here and he can talk about the UK trade deal. But just this is the monthly numbers. And they have gone up a lot. June is actually set for another big increase of 27 billion. That is money coming into U.S. coffers from tariffs. We are collecting a lot of revenue. So far, guys, $121 billion has flowed into the U.S. government since the start of the fiscal year.
And that is, in the eyes of Americans, a big win, Kosha. Trump was elected on an America First platform, and this is precisely what he said he was going to deliver. I still remember, because it was only a few weeks ago, the enormous meltdown. We saw it right here in Australia. Every so-called expert saying that this is economically irresponsible, it can't work. And yet it is working, and pretty much as he explained it would.
100%. I think the fall from grace of so-called experts has been second to none in recent times on everything. And something like basic economics or just modern economics even is not something that there can be an expert in because it has never been tried in this way, at least in the last half century, if not longer. There have been some examples here and there, like Ronald Reagan was charging tariffs on the motorcycle category to save Harley Davidson, which he did do. But by and large, it was never done in this way. And Trump has been talking about it for 40 years, well before he entered politics. He now has the bully pulpit. He's done it. And the principle, again, is simple, that the most desirable consumer market in the world is the U.S. If you want access to that market, you've got to pay a toll on the way in. And it seems to be working, and at least that CNBC journalists seem to be pretty measured and even-keeled about it, and maybe even a little bit pleasantly surprised.
Now, the White House has announced that President Trump will be in Florida for the opening of Alligator Alcatraz. Yes, that's what we're calling it. Here is White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
On a scheduling note, tomorrow, President Trump will travel to the great state of Florida to attend the opening of a new illegal alien detention center located at Dade Collier Training and Transition Airport alongside Secretary Kristi Noem, Governor Ron DeSantis, Congressman Byron Donalds, and other state and local leaders. We hope to see many of you there. The facility is in the heart of the Everglades and will be informally known as Alligator Alcatraz.
Kosha, what do you make of Alligator Alcatraz? I can't imagine too many Democrats going and protesting on its gates. It sounds pretty ominous.
I think they might think twice before running their pickets for that one. You know, this thing hits every note of what the Trump administration is about. Immigration and really mass deportations of illegals is the centerpiece of his policy agenda. As we all know, Florida is one of the best run states in the country and has been very cooperative with the federal government in trying to execute this immigration agenda, unlike other states, sanctuary cities, et cetera, that try to stymie it. Then you've got the optics of Trump himself visiting, Kristi Noem, DeSantis going to be there in the Florida Everglades, where it physically is surrounded by swamps that have lots and lots of alligators and pythons over there, which is sort of this natural moat. And you can just see Trump and his Truth Social and all that is going to make hay from this. Get ready for some interesting and funny tweets out of there. But more importantly, I think it's just the imagery of it really is going to stick in the minds of people about what he's trying to do with getting illegals out in cooperation with states and holding them in detention centers that are not meant to be pleasant.
Alligator Alcatraz. I mean, that's just genius, I've got to say. Whoever came up with that, kudos. Now, sticking with prisons, let's have a look at how the president of El Salvador responded to footage out of Paris Fashion Week, which was a show by Willy Chavarria, a Mexican-American designer, protesting against El Salvador's super prisons. First, let's have a look at the show. And here is how the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, responded. He wrote, "We are ready to ship them all to Paris whenever we get the green light from the French government." He doesn't mess around, Kosha. And it's no denying the Western media, all the activist class, the academics hate what's happening in El Salvador, but he is enormously popular, possibly the most popular leader in the world right now.
Mm-hmm. Huge approval ratings of like 90%. He got reelected resoundingly the second time. His prison, super prison as it's called, is famous around the world. The U.S., obviously, the Trump administration has even had contracts with him to send some of those deportees to him. He's also cut from a different cloth of this new form of leader, whether it's him or Javier Milei or Trump or Farage, as we discussed. They're different, but they basically, they're sharp-tongued, they're quick-witted. They don't take any of this nonsense from the media. They reframe the narrative and flip it around very effectively, and they're tough in terms of their governance policies, and he certainly exemplifies that.
Kosha Gator, always a pleasure. Thanks for your time tonight.